Hey everybody, it's Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to episode 2 of the Wolf of the Grand Exchange. Starting off this episode, we just reached over 1 mil at the end of the last episode, and we're going to be flipping some of Zulrah's scales. These might end up being the MVP of the entire series, I'm not going to lie. They work out very well for quite a while. The big thing about them is for the 4-hour buying limit, which I will be discussing a little bit more in a little while, is really good for these guys. It's 18,000 scales per 4 hours, which it's not fantastic. It's not like I'm making 1k per scale, so that 18,000 adds up to 18 mil, but it still works out pretty well, making 4 or 5 coins per flip. We can make a good 50 to 60k in 4 hours, where most items we really can't do that, at least most supply-like items. Another one that started working out really well for me were death runes. I've been trying most runes. They fall into the category of supplies, but death runes just seemed to flip the quickest and generally for the most consistent profit. Only 3 to 4 coins per flip generally, or per rune per flip. I usually was trying to flip a few thousand of them at a time, so it's nothing phenomenal quite yet, just making a few K per flip. But since we started with 1k, I would have taken that no problem when trying to get up to this point. So we're definitely improving, and that's really all I can ask for at this point. It's nice that I'm starting to actually make more money per hour, but it's still not anything that I would like to brag about. Either way, these death runes lasted for a while. They also have a pretty high buying limit. Off the top of my head, I want to say it was 15,000, maybe it was 12,000. I'll actually go look that up in a second, so I can talk to you about that in a minute. But definitely close runner-up for the MVP would be death runes at the moment. They have been flipping very well. After that, though, I started going with some other supplies like bowstrings. At this point, my 4 hours had reset, so I was doing some Zulrah's scales again, and clearly was planning on doing some more death runes, but I don't have quite the big enough cash stack to be doing a ton of items at once. I was trying 3 different right here, but these flax were kind of giving me a hard time. The 13,000 flax, 13,000 is the buying limit overnight, or excuse me, for 4 hours. So usually if I'm selling 13k flax, it's probably because I just bought a bunch overnight for a fairly low price, or any multiple 13,000, 26, 39, anything of the sorts. As you can see, bowstrings actually were flipping pretty well for me, so I definitely stuck with them. But in this clip, it's really more about the Zulrah's scales. They are giving me some pretty killer profit for sure. It's not insane per flip. I'd like to get a point where I'm making more than 3 coins per item flipped, and I'll definitely be trying that during this episode. But for now, since I'm really just flipping supplies like Zulrah's scales and death runes, that's really all we can deal with is 3 to 4, maybe 5 coins per flip, which sounds a little ridiculous, but if you flip 5,000 items at 5 coins per flip, it's 25k, and I could flip 5,000 Zulrah's scales in just a few minutes. So 25k, if I was making 10k per flip, make it a little easier, 5k per flip, it would take 5 items, where I'm assuming if it's 5,000 coin, if it is a 5,000 coin profit margin, I don't know, I feel like a couple minutes for a flip would still be reasonable there. So I'm definitely happy with how all of this is going, but it looks like I'll probably be doing Zulrah scales and death runes for quite a long time. They've been treating me right, so I don't know, I don't see why I would change. So for you guys, your sense of time compared to what I'm doing is a little skewed. It's actually been 2 weeks of flipping now, which means I need to get another bond. And it looks a little ridiculous. I'm about to spend most of my money on a bond, almost resetting us completely. But once this bond buys at 1.8 mil, looks like we have 408k to deal with, which is, it's clearly only a fifth of what we just had. But it's basically like if I got to start this with 400k instead of 1k. So I'll be back up to that 2 mil in no time. Now we have less money than we started with in this episode, but don't worry, we'll make it back. To make the stack back, I didn't really do anything different than I did the first time, which would, make sense. That's how I made the money. That's how I know how to get back up to that stack. So we went right back to flipping some more supplies, namely Zulrah's scales. If you guys, any of you out there fight Zulrah, you know that the scales as a drop make a lot of money. Well, that's not the only way to make money from these scales. It's definitely been the majority of my profit, Zulrah's scales. And honestly, it's probably going to be like that for the majority of the series, since once I get to a point where I could buy 18,000 scales at once and flip them all really quick, I still want to do that because it's going to be like a 60 to 100k flip very easily. Once I hit the 4-hour buying limit for some of my more used supplies, I started testing some other things out like gems and planks, all sorts of materials still. and really spread out a little bit. Didn't make a lot from any of these things specifically, but the sapphires were probably the best item that I tested of new items. Coal started working out a little better too. I've used coal in the past, or I flipped it I should say, and I really wasn't getting, I would get like 1 coin per coal. In this case I was getting 3 coins per coal, which is what I was also getting with blood runes, and since I could do a lot of them, I don't know, it added up pretty well. I then decided, once I got back up to my 2 mil stack, that I would try some more expensive items. What you see here is that the magic fangs worked the best. They actually gave me a little bit more confidence when it comes to flipping expensive items. I'm not very good at that. And I also got a couple of kraken tentacles to work too, but didn't make a lot of cash off that. Once my 4-hour buying limit reset though, I went right back to Zulrah scales and death runes. You're going to be seeing a lot of this for mostly this episode and maybe even the next one. But this is where I finally tried something different. I started trying to flip some cannonballs, and I couldn't believe it took me this long to even think about flipping them. They're very similar to Zulrah scales. A lot are traded, and it's a similar price. And they indeed worked out very well. The only problem is with Zulrah scales, the 4-hour buying limit is 18,000, and the 4-hour buying limit for cannonballs is only 7,000. So you can only flip 7,000 cannonballs per 4 hours. Clearly, only a third of the profit we get from Zulrah scales, but it still was pretty killer. We found a really good margin on them. Occasionally, I was able to get like 8 coins per item. So if I flipped 1,000 at an 8-coin flip, an 8k flip times 7 would be 56k from that. It's basically another Zulrah scales. And then a big thing that happened to me when I went to price check some broad bolts is when I went to buy the broad bolt, it only cost me 1 coin. When I went to sell the broad bolt, it only sold for 1 coin, which means I could likely buy them for 1 coin. So that's why you see I have 15,000 of them trying to buy for 1 coin a piece. And I do end up getting a couple of bolts from that. I got a few of them to buy for 1 coin. It was kind of a weird thing that was going on. But only like 5 or 6 of them selling back for 60 coins a piece. Percentage-wise, killer profit, but it really only adds up to like 300 coins. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was kind of cool. If it were a bigger item, and maybe it's a bigger deal. But either way, didn't really make a ton of cash out of that. What did start to work well, the U-logs, as you can see, definitely buying and selling pretty well, but the U-longbows were a lot better. They're traded a little more often, I believe. I'd actually have to look that up and check. But I believe they're traded more often than the U-logs, and their profit margin was usually like 10 coins a piece. And they really trade just like runes, so if I could find 10 coins a piece for death runes, I'd be stoked about it. So I was definitely happy with them. They don't buy and sell as often as runes, so I'm not necessarily comparing them to those. But it's another item, and when it comes to the 4-hour buying limit, when I'm trying to flip supplies, I just need to find a bunch of different supplies that'll work. Because I managed to flip some more expensive items successfully one time, I figured I'd go at it again now that I had a decent cash stack to work with, and it started to work out pretty well. I was able to make 15 to 20k for a single item flipped, which is way more than we've been doing with things like Zulrah's scales and whatnot. It wasn't the quickest thing. I think the money per hour averaged around the same. It still wasn't anything phenomenal, but it worked out. Here's where something crazy happened. As you can see, I was buying some volcanic whip mixes, and I managed to get them to buy for 1k a piece. When I went to sell them back for 20k a piece, they all sold for a little over 100k a piece. So I made a little over 100k per flip. It only worked out with 3 of them, but it was a quick 300k. Definitely the best profit we've had the entire time. Kind of saved us in a way. One thing I was trying, the reason I got to the volcanic whip mixes, is I was looking for kind of an in-between item. Instead of supplies or really expensive things that you can only flip like 10, I went for right in the middle. Things like dragon items, the Helm of Neatsnot, excuse me if I say that wrong, that was a big one for me and turned out to be big for quite a while actually. Dragon helms and scimitars, I usually was only actually able to get 8 to 10 of them to flip pretty well, but it still added up to a decent profit. Things like warriors helms and archers helms, they also kind of worked, but for a while those medium type items definitely made me a pretty good profit. I didn't stick to them forever though. Eventually my 4-hour buying limits started to hit again, and I was able to do items like cannonballs, and Zulrah's scales ended up coming back. The Magic Fang didn't necessarily make me the most money in this episode, but I think it's the item I'm most happy that I found because it was a good 15 to 20k per flip, and it was pretty consistent, so I'm very happy with the Magic Fang. But after selling all this coal, it puts us right at a 5 mil stack, almost exactly. I think it's going to be an exact 5 mil stack. Look at how well that adds up. 425 and 4,025 and 975, we hit 5 mil, which is where I wanted to end episode 2, was at 5 mil. We made 1 mil in the first episode. Now we're up to 5, hoping to get up to 10 for the next one. Overall, I think it worked out well this episode. I learned a few new things. I hope you guys did too. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you everyone for watching today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to click on that like button and tell us what you enjoyed about it. If you're looking for some more RuneScape videos like this one, then be sure to join the cul-de-sac by subscribing for more. We will see you next time.